Welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of A Story Club, Global Politics and Cultures, brought to you by Bulletproof Podcast Formula. My name is Dr. Kirk Megu, and I'm the Public Relations Officer of the United National Congress, the official opposition party in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a unique venture. It's streaming simultaneously from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, Dehradun in India, and San Francisco in the United States. We speak with people around the world, trying to understand different issues and problems relevant to my own country, Trinidad and Tobago, but also to people in sometimes very similar, but sometimes very different situations, cultures, histories, politics, sociology, etc. The goal is to learn from each other, to build networks, to widen our perspectives, and to work for solutions in our distinctive contexts. Today's episode is titled Bitcoin, Blockchain, and Small Island Developing States: Opportunities, Challenges, and Questions. Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain are revolutionary developments that excite, confuse, and raise skepticism. It goes to the heart of questions like the nature of money, the role of governments and central banks, freedom, privacy, and security on the internet and in economics, technology development, the digital divide, asset bubbles, investment scams and pyramid schemes, and so much more. From the perspective of developing countries, there are many issues that are raised. Can this help with our development? Does this give us more control over our financing and our economics? What exactly is Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and blockchain? Will this continue to produce and reinforce the divide between the haves and the have-nots, the big and the small, the technologically advanced and the technologically underdeveloped? Today, I have two very interesting guests to speak about these issues and questions from a very practical perspective. George C.O.C. Samuels, I hope I pronounced that right. Did I?
You got it right. You got it right.
George C.O.C. Samuels is originally from Fiji, but based in Singapore. He is the managing director of management consultancy, FIRE. I hope I pronounced that one right.
That's right.
And the founder of the blockchain-based accountability platform, Hona. His Bitcoin journey began in 2013. He was the global head of community for the Bitcoin Cash Association in 2018 and is now South Pacific ambassador for the Bitcoin Association. Daniel Barkan is an entrepreneur, founder, and co-founder of several well-known businesses and an NGO based in Trinidad and Tobago. He's also a blockchain and cryptocurrency enthusiast. His involvements in the space cover a broad range, such as investing, education, mining, and exploring utilizing blockchain for impact. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, Kirk.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, Kirk.
Yeah, it's really great to have you guys here. I look forward to the conversation. So I gave a little introduction there, but we normally start off our programs by asking a bit about your backgrounds. So for each of you, I'd like you to tell me and tell our audience a bit about your background and how you got involved in blockchain and Bitcoin. So let's start off with George and then Daniel. So George.
Yeah, sure. So George C.O.C. Samuels, Managing Director of FIRE. I actually very passionate about communities in general. Had a stint, started out as a programmer originally, then got into sales and marketing, was actually an animator for a while, made a name for myself as a cultural animator. I was animating Indigenous myths and legends at one point in time, got sponsored by
Sorry, we're going to stop you. Pause. No, it's interesting because I know you're a Fijian background. So was this programming in Fiji or elsewhere?
Fiji is fine.
No, so you were a programmer in Fiji and doing this animation.
Oh no, sorry. No, the programmer was in Australia at the time.
Oh, okay, right.
So yeah. So do you want me to just go over my?
Continue.
Okay. So yes, originally born in Fiji, but I migrated to Australia when I was about 2 years old.
Right.
Then was in Australia to about the age of 8. Then family moved to Bangladesh and was there for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Went to an international school for those 10 years, but during that time went back and forth to Fiji. Right. My mom she did a very good job of ensuring that our roots, was always kept. And we had that in us.
And just for our Trinidad and Tobago audience and Caribbean audience as well, there's a lot of similarities between Fiji and Trinidad that many people might not be aware of, like the sugar plantations, indentured Indians, and we come from the same place. Like, for instance, you all eat dal puri in Fiji, don't you?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, in Guyana, in Trinidad, Suriname. And many people think it's just our creation, but you guys have it as well. And
yes, we do.
And then even I've seen pictures of dantal playing, like with the harmonium, and you have the same sort of music culture.
For sure. Island culture in general, music, dance, song, it's a very big part of the lifestyle of the culture. And so the Indian population in Fiji is large.
And you're of mixed heritage, both.
Correct.
Is it native Fijian and Indian?
No. So my dad's third generation, although it might be possible, but from what I know of our family history, third generation Indo-Fijian, and then from my mother's side we've got the Tuvalu and Samoan. And, and then I was produced.
Right, nice, excellent. Okay, yeah. And then you went to Australia, programming. You did the indigenous animation.
Yes,
indigenous animation. Australian or indigenous?
It started off with, it actually started with myths and legends from Tuvalu, so from my maternal homeland, right, from my mother's side. And then that was at the time when climate change news was, getting stronger. Tuvalu was at the forefront of that news. And as a result of doing that, Adobe ended up sponsoring the projects that I was working on. And I ended up being invited to actually teach animation to some indigenous communities in Australia. And so that's how, the indigenous myths and legends came to be. And it was a very interesting journey and something that I think I'm going to find myself coming back to. And it actually tied into things like blockchain and Bitcoin, because, if we look at that, it's really about timekeeping. That's how I look at it. And, proper records. And for indigenous communities around the world who have very strong oral storytelling traditions, keeping those stories alive for the long term is very important. And, if you have any sort of system that is able to record these versions of stories, it becomes an important part of those cultures. And for history in general, right? A lot of the times when we are taught history, it usually is through the lens of certain groups. Whereas with, a blockchain type technology, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to preserve all those different versions and tellings, and especially from the wisdom keepers of the world.
Could you explain that a bit more for our listeners? Because I think most people are thinking of Bitcoin. First of all, blockchain, they might not even understand.
It might just
only a minority would say blockchain. They know Bitcoin, and they think of Bitcoin as something that some people consider it a pyramid scheme. They think of it as an investment thing. So to link it to myths and legends and ledgers and stuff, I think a lot of people might not make the connection. So could you please do that?
For sure. So Bitcoin utilizes blockchain technology. Blockchain technology actually has been around for some time now. So that's not necessarily new. And I do know that people in the industry sometimes interchange, their project, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or something of the sort. People think that is blockchain and blockchain alone. But all of these different projects utilize blockchain in a different way. And Bitcoin is one of those implementations of blockchain technology, but it uses economics as a technical solution, as a security solution. So I think that's what I find the most fascinating. But the way I usually describe Bitcoin is a plumbing system. For me, that's how I originally saw it and what I've come to learn about the system. It's a plumbing system. And I think right now what people are investing in when it comes to Bitcoin, BTC, that is sort of like the house on top of that plumbing system. What they're investing in is actually the token that's on exchanges and stuff. But Bitcoin as a technology is way more than just the house on top. It's literally the underlying cash system.
I mean,
and so,
in fact, okay, go on.
No, go for it. I can.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, from my own little involvement and understanding and so forth. I mean, it came out of the 2008 crash, where you had asset bubbles and banks cheating literally cheating on their ledgers and stealing money. And this was a big part of the huge crash in 2008. And it was a system to stop that. So not trusting banks and governments only. And so that it's a whole system of anonymous people who are checking the transactions along the way when one person is buying and another person is selling or whatnot. And it becomes this system of decentralized accounting as opposed to trusting governments and banks. And so in a sense, I guess I could see that this myth thing is that it's not in the hands of some, I don't know, central authority for the myths that may distort it, but in the hands of a wide number of people who will ensure that there's some sort of community ownership. Am I correct in thinking of it that
Almost.
way? Or am I, yeah, correct
Almost.
me if I'm wrong.
Almost. And Daniel, we'll definitely get to you. I want to hear from you as well. Sorry if we're going straight into the blockchain stuff. There's an interesting thing here at play. What I find fascinating is sort of the cultural myth of even the creator of Bitcoin, and then what like Bitcoin itself, right? So you've got the technology and what it's capable of. Then you have people's ideologies on top of that, right? And the way for people who are actually religious, I usually use this as like an analogy, right? You've got Bitcoin, which was kind of like set in stone, the 10 Commandments sort of thing, this thing called the white paper, right? With Bitcoin.
Satoshi and so forth.
Yeah. But what usually happens with human beings who read things and their interpretations, right? It's the interpretations that end up causing different factions, right? And people take sort of those writings and try to implement their understanding or interpretation of the thing. So what I've seen in the market, for the last decade is right now BTC, the strongest narrative for the people has been around, I guess a lean more towards anonymous transactions, right? But as a system and blockchain in general, blockchain is a public ledger, right? Now I was talking about that plumbing system. Its security feature is a very simple thing that it's public, right? But it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. And there's an important difference, right? Because purely anonymous would mean that you wouldn't even be able to see the transactions anywhere, right? There'd be no audit trail of that. Pseudonymous means that you will see all these transactions happening on the network, but you just might not know who was at the two ends of those points, right, in the transaction. However, if we're looking at the whole thing about corruption, my understanding is that the system was not necessarily ideologically based for being anti-government or anti-bank. It was about anti-corruption, or let's just say pro-honesty. That's probably a better phrase. And again, that's an important distinction, because if you have a system that's anti-bank and anti-government, what do you think the likelihood is of that thing truly surviving over the long run? Knowing what we know about power in the world.
Exactly. They would shut it down.
Correct. And it's already happening, right? You have China, many other major superpowers, even the EU just recently also said that they're essentially going to be putting a ban on certain type of cryptocurrency assets, et cetera. So this is, I think, an important thing to look at. And what I've been looking at is that you have the culture from the people ground up, but then you also have the power players on the top. And that clash, well, it's going to be interesting, because even back in 2008, we saw Occupy Wall Street, right? Huge swirl of energy, right? And people really motivated to do something to hit back against Wall Street. What happened in the end? Occupy Wall Street movement dissolved. There was infighting amongst, all the anonymous players. And then, Wall Street just continued doing what they were doing.
Correct. Well, that's a good little discussion to start off there. But let's get to Daniel and bring him in. So in terms of your own background and how you got involved in blockchain and Bitcoin, Daniel, can you explain that to our audience?
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. It's amazing you guys just really jumped straight into the meat of it there. But basically, I think my story can actually be an interesting one, because I think it would be quite relatable to a lot of your audience, because I was aware of this for about 4 or 5 years, but I was on the fence. I was a bit skeptical. I was always interested in the blockchain technology. But of course, the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was really taking center stage in and around it. And I saw a lot of my friends get very excited and invest, and it was like the best thing ever. And then they all lost their, a lot of them lost their wealth. because they did not really understand it's a market, and markets have cycles, and markets will be manipulated and whatnot. So that to me was like, I found it very, very interesting, you know. And I started to look deeper into blockchain, and I just kind of realized like there were a lot of other elements that really spoke to me in terms of like blockchain for excitement, for blockchain for impact, you know, like how can you utilize that? And it's very interesting to hear George's story about utilizing it with, you know, with keeping history and culture and whatnot. And there's something that I'll get into later, George, and I honestly believe in energy and universal serendipity, because I've started working on a blockchain for impact project, and honestly, just listening to you in the first few bits, like I think there can be some amazing collaborations. But to get back to it, you know, what really interested me was, you know, this, at the end of the day, this is like it's a rule-based monetary system. It's a programmable monetary system that once it's there, it cannot be altered by external parties. The Federal Reserve can't come in and change it. Central banks can't come in and change it. And to me, that has huge value, because we've seen our current monetary systems be manipulated, you know, and the guys at the top win and the guys at the bottom lose. And to me, it was very exciting to see this is a genuine opportunity for a fair shot at things and decentralization. So that really piqued my interest. And as I started to learn a bit more, I became quite passionate about investing and wealth creation, because most people are on a 9-to-5 job, and at the end of the day, you're on the rat race, and you're not going to get ahead in life if you're not really investing in smart ways and those types of things. So for me, like the investment and wealth creation side of it definitely attracted me. But as I started to dig deeper, you know, as George mentioned, the community side of it is incredible. And utilizing blockchain technology is going to be in every major business, from many useful things, from supply chain to smart contracts and insurance and payment systems and remittances. And you know, the sky's the limit. And in my opinion, this is like the third. We are the exponential age. We're at the start of like a third digital revolution. And people think that we're late, but we're still very early. And that's why I'm just passionate about sharing this amongst my friends and communities. Like, if I believe in something, man, I'm gonna share it. I'm gonna talk about it. And so I'm still quite inexperienced in this space. There are a lot of people in Trinidad that would be more experienced than I am. But I am passionate, and I do share a lot, and I like to connect dots, and it's been an amazing journey for me so far.
Right. Good. You know, I mean, you talked about the investment and people losing their investment. I bought some Bitcoin a while back, and at one point I was scammed out of it, because the way I bought it was through some sort of a group that held it. I didn't have my own crypto wallet. So they ran off with it, and are probably very wealthy with that now, because, and then the second set I bought, it did crash for a while, but then in the past year, I like recouped everything. But it's not the investment opportunity that I was interested in, because as you say, you know, anything could be a bubble, an asset bubble, and then pop and whatnot, right? It's like real estate and etc. But I was interested in the thing itself, you know, so here is a way of doing transactions with anybody from around the world without going through the SWIFT system, without having my bank charge me $35 for you know, arbitrary fees, and it's just a person-to-person thing. And I thought, you know, this is great. This is a way to bypass these things and have direct person-to-person contact. But then I found in Trinidad, when I tried to buy something using Bitcoin, and then the exchange, I couldn't you know, connect with it. I had to, you know, there were only a few people selling, and sometimes I had to meet them at you know, Mid-Center Mall or something,
shady places
to exchange it for US or something. And so there are still aspects. So there's the investment aspect. Then there's this sort of the use, what it eventually will be used for. But I don't know if we've got there yet. We have a few businesses, like I see Trotters, and we've had Peter George here before. They accept Bitcoin actually, and I don't know how many businesses in Trinidad also do. And so there's the practical use side of it, and there's the investment side of it. So I'd like you guys to maybe, talk a bit more about that. Yeah, we did speak about what it was and the investment side, but in terms of its possibilities and benefits, you did touch on it, Daniel, but let's try to get you guys to expand on it a bit more. George and then Daniel.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I always make it a point to differentiate between investment and speculation, right? I think a lot of people that when they're saying they are investing, they're really just speculating because there's no like method to what they're doing, right? They're just like, hey, I saw my friend, they put something into something, it went up, and I want it to go up as well. And that's a very powerful narrative because this is why, lotteries are still very popular today, right? But if you're looking at true wealth generation, you do have to look at the long term, right? The longer horizon. And I like what Daniel was saying about in terms of, this being that revolution, but, true revolutions still take time. And if you look at the history of like world-changing inventions, it takes about, I think at minimum 30 years, because you have the technology, which evolves and happens very rapidly, but human beings, and when it comes to change, still slow. It's like our brains haven't upgraded, but the technology is, getting faster and faster. And so you see this with a lot of technologies over time, from the electric car. It was available back in the 70s, but it took about 30 years before someone like Elon Musk came to actually make it mainstream. And I see the same thing happening in this space as well when it comes to Bitcoin, blockchain, et cetera. And even in the blockchain space, there are, of course, a lot of different like competing protocols, right? But the way that I see it, and I planned my company, we planned for 30 years as well. We're already 10 years in, and we still see another 20 years to go before we're going to really see like true mainstream adoption. And you can see this because what you were talking about, Kirk, with the sort of day-to-day, like actual transacting. So yes, there have been many people who have accepted Bitcoin, but many of the bigger players too who've tried to accept Bitcoin found out that it actually wasn't usable. And the reason for this is cultural. Culturally, people still think in their local currencies. And the irony is we talk about, things like Bitcoin being like a global money, but we still associate its value in fiat dollars. Yeah. Right. And that doesn't make sense. Like if we were truly making the Bitcoin or whatever, cryptocurrency like valuable, you would see the transactions, like these on-chain transactions, we call them, right, actually go up. But what we're actually seeing is like in the background, a lot of the transactions are just kind of like this, and the fiat is all over the place. So what that tells me is that, people are still speculating, but nobody's actually using. Yeah, exactly. And so, and I think it will take time because there's a cultural shift that has to happen. And we also have to see what the other bigger power players are going to do, right? Because what that would mean with a global cash, as an example, is that these other governments around the world would lose power. And these governments are not going to just sit back and let, power be taken away from them. Right.
So I thought it would be like a payment system, like, I don't know, like a credit card, and you just pay for it, but you have to kind of wait for people to verify the transaction. So it's not like an instant payment in a sense.
Well, technically, yes. Sorry, Daniel, I'll let you go and then I'll comment on that.
No.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel, do you want to say something there? You can come in.
I'll let George finish this. I mean, there's so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there is. So there's a few things going on, right? Remember, I was talking about like, and I kind of go back to Bitcoin only because it's sort of like the grandfather of it all, right? And Bitcoin is actually capable of a lot more, but it's got technical limitations, self-imposed. So blockchain in the Bitcoin system was supposed to be like a Visa or MasterCard or SWIFT, right? To kind of replace it. And currencies were actually sort of meant to be minted on top of that system. So technically, you wouldn't necessarily need to use Bitcoin as day-to-day payments. You could still use your general local currency, but the difference would have been that that system underneath it would have been Bitcoin. And that is what would provide the transparency. So the problem right now, as we know, is that we have all these private databases, right? But imagine if you took that layer out and it was all Bitcoin based, right? From a system, the plumbing, then that means all of these other transactions that are happening with whatever dollar is actually recorded on the ledger. So everybody can see those transactions, and good forensic specialists, digital ones, they could actually go in and find the corrupt people. They would have evidence for it from a financial standpoint. That is actually revolutionary. But what people have focused on is that next layer, right? So they're trying to replace like local currencies with Bitcoin, but it doesn't make sense in the real world. because everybody still thinks in their local currency. And
Right.
the people who are actually about liberty don't realize too that if you're looking for a global currency, you also implement the possibility of a global one government. And many of these same libertarians don't want a global government.
That's
but
right.
You end up leaning towards there
That's
by
right.
wanting that.
And then to me, what you're saying, that's fascinating, the way you explained it in terms of the currency on top of the Bitcoin. It sounds a bit like, the people who advocate for returning to the gold standard. So that gold is like the universal thing, and you have your local currencies, but in the end you have your fixed amount of gold, and it gets converted. So it's kind of like a digital replacement for the gold currency with an added layer of the public ledger. Is that it?
In some way, because you do look at the history of money as well, and it wasn't that long ago that the United States unpegged itself from gold. That is what I would say led to 2008 over the decades, because you have the Fed who's just trying to do what gold was doing naturally, right? And that's why something like Bitcoin is quite amazing, and why it kind of needs to be one, because it is supposed to provide that digital. I don't like using digital gold; it's not always the best analogy. But because of that scarcity factor that is similar to gold, it was meant to sort of act as part of that element, right? That makes good sound money. Because historically, gold is actually good sound money over the centuries. Correct. And you don't want to completely remove that, because that has tested itself. Bitcoin is still relatively new, right? But yes, it has properties of gold, but it's not just gold.
Yeah, excellent. Daniel, let me bring you inside here.
Yeah, so just to add to some of those things, what it really has started to become is just an incredible store of value right now, because a lot of people don't know this, but the Federal Reserve has printed an enormously large amount of cash within the past year and a half under COVID and all of these types of things. Lots of stimulus checks are literally being given out in the US right now. And right here in the Caribbean, and I'm sure a lot of other small islands, we are here worshiping the US dollar because we rely on it for, our import trade business model, which so many businesses have. And cash is now becoming a liability. I mean, it always was to some extent, but, the heat has really, really turned up. So, you're a wealthy person, you have cash sitting down in an account. Some places even have negative interest rates. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to go in and put that money into gold, silver, real estate, and now a secure, uncorruptible monetary system that is now Bitcoin. Now, eventually, maybe at some point, I can see Bitcoin becoming a bit more of a transactional system. But for now, I think it's just because there's a finite supply. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be in existence, unlike an unlimited amount of fiat that central banks could go and print. And at the end of the day, it's supply and demand, and that is just going to drive price up, and hence a great store of value. And back to the investing standpoint of it, and that if you just think long term, you will do well. It's the quickest, it's the most valuable appreciating asset of our time. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something close to around 200% per year growth or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's, that's phenomenal. What a lot of people don't know is one Bitcoin is actually broken down into 100 million Satoshis. Now that is a smaller denomination of a currency, which can start to be traded and whatnot. But I mean, this is getting a bit technical, but there's a layer 2 underneath Bitcoin called Lightning right now that is going to be that seems to be a bit more better for facilitating payments, quicker transactions, and all these types of things. But blockchain in general, I think Bitcoin is going to remain a really amazing store of value. But there's a good chance that another type of a blockchain system and cryptocurrency could come and solve that payment problem in a different way.
I want to ask you something, because you mentioned in your little brief bio mining, and this is something that's important for us in Trinidad and Tobago and the system as a whole. Bitcoin is actually environmentally expensive in terms of energy, because it takes a lot of computing energy to make the transactions and to put it on the public ledger. And just for the audience's sake, I'll break it down, and if I'm mistaken, you guys can correct me. But basically, when a transaction occurs, it's kind of put up on a place where anybody can go to verify it, and so people kind of compete to verify the transactions, and it goes down a line basically, and that's how everything is kept honest and transparent, etc. But in that process, it's a lot of computing energy taken up. And I just saw in Malaysia, they publicly destroyed thousands of mining equipment because they were stealing electricity from Malaysia. And this is a problem in many countries. Now, right close to us in Trinidad and Tobago, it's El Salvador, I think just a couple of weeks ago, accepted Bitcoin as official tender. And they have a volcano in El Salvador. And so they are encouraging Bitcoin mining using geothermal energy from the volcano, which is very interesting. Now, we have an oil and gas industry, and we had based, we at one point we were the largest exporter of ammonia in the world, of methanol in the world. We were a leading LNG, liquefied natural gas exporter in the world. For such a small space, it's been incredible what we've done. But that whole park, for a whole set of reasons I won't get into here, has just collapsed at industrial estate. But I was always wondering about our energy resources and Bitcoin mining as something. Now, since you mentioned this, Daniel, in your brief bio there, what are your thoughts? What's your involvement? Have you touched on this at all? Have you been involved in Bitcoin mining and whatnot?
So, interestingly enough, I am actually very passionate about the environment, and I run an NGO with my brother, and our goal is to really facilitate and drive positive social and environmental change in Trinidad and Tobago and the region. Yes, Bitcoin mining does take a significant amount of energy because it's based on a system called proof of work, where these complex computers are constantly calculating these equations in these blocks, which does take a lot of computing power. There is another system of blockchain called proof of stake, but I'm not going to get into those techniques right now. In my opinion, so China had a significant amount of the mining centralized over there, and a lot of those were plugged into kind of dirty coal power plants and whatnot. So at one point, a significant amount of the mining was plugged into dirtier power. But what I'm seeing right now, interestingly, that China has actually banned mining there. And a lot of those miners have had to sell their rigs to other places and whatnot. And you're seeing these interesting renewable innovations. So you touched on El Salvador with geothermal, etc. There's a company in Texas that are actually capping methane and natural gas flares, which is just expended energy, and they are plugging that into fueling mining equipment.
Like we had in Pointe-a-Pierre.
Precisely, which ties in. So in my opinion, what's cool is I'm seeing it as it's kind of pushing the envelope in terms of trying to get creative with cleaner sources of energy. But the reality is, every industry uses energy, whether it comes from coal, natural gas, solar, nuclear, whatever it may be. The banking sector uses a massive amount of energy. The construction sector, there's so many. So interestingly enough, for us here in Trinidad, because we are very blessed, we're a fossil fuel-based economy, one of the only in the Caribbean, we have enjoyed subsidized energy rates for a very long time. And as a result of that, we've become quite, dependent and a bit wasteful, in my opinion, and whatnot. But as you mentioned, our sector, a big part of our industrial sector is we're not reinventing the wheel. I think that our governments specifically, it'll be a bit difficult for other Caribbean islands because they don't enjoy, some of the energy benefits that we have. But the model of giving subsidized energy towards an industry is no reinvention of the wheel for us here in Trinidad. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, if we can lock in some good energy rates, some favorable energy rates for some mining operations here in Trinidad, that could bring some massive profits and great foreign exchange back to our economy that we so need. Mm-hmm. Mining is one component of this, but what I would really love to see our government do is really, they say that they want to embrace tech and invest in tech, but I'm really passionate about seeing the educational aspect of it. Really educating the youth on this new system, this new tech system. Mm-hmm. Because as I mentioned, every major business is going to have elements of the blockchain system in and around their businesses. And it's an opportunity, like a new frontier for, for young people to learn, to come and start to code on these systems and build and create. And, I mean, I have friends that are, chemical engineers at Oxford University that have, put down that degree to actually, go and learn different types of language systems on blockchain. And they're working for large companies, making nice, $8,000 a month, working from their laptop anywhere. That money's coming back into Trinidad. So I see the Caribbean, I would love to see the Caribbean really embrace the educational facilitation aspect of blockchain. The mining is definitely an opportunity, and I think that our governments should have a closer look at it because it is a big opportunity. I think Venezuela is profiting from it because of their situation as well. And it will be good to see mining become more decentralized throughout the globe as well.
Very good. Yeah, George, now, I came to know about you through the Small Island Innovate. What is it? A seminar you did. What's it? Small
Island
like a finance
Innovation? Forum. Yes, yeah. Finance. Yeah, I forgot the name as well.
So I can't remember the whole acronym or the whole title, but it's Small Island and Innovation and whatnot. And there was a forum where there was mainly Caribbean people, because it's interesting. The Eastern Caribbean have implemented a cryptocurrency. I don't know the details of the Eastern Caribbean dollar. You might know more than me. You were in the seminar as well. And then also I know there's something, I believe it's called sugar coin, that the Bahamas have put in. And then you yourself are from Fiji, and you're based in Singapore, and you're right now, I believe, in Panama. So you've been working around in various, islands and developing countries around the world. And I'd like to hear your perspective on does this provide a special opportunity for small countries or developing countries, in your opinion, or is it just like yet another type of technology we had better catch up with, or else we're going to be left behind? Tell me what you're...
A very good point. So I think that's a good segue into the project that we're working on at the moment with the Tuvalu government. So, Tuvalu also, if we're looking at climate change, they're at the forefront of that. So they have very real issues that they have to think about in terms of their existence, right? But what I really admire, especially with the minister that we're working with, Honorable Minister Simon Kofe, he actually works with the Justice, Communications and Foreign Affairs Department. But he was looking at the blockchain technology as a way to leapfrog. And I think this is the only way that many, developing nations, island states, the way they have to approach it, right? Because just sort of keeping up with everybody else is not enough. Like, you do have to find things that will allow you to have that edge and move ahead, And I feel that things like blockchain and blockchain-based services or businesses is that way that a lot of these island nation states can leapfrog ahead. Because right now, many of them are simply just trying to go to digital. Many are still like manual paper-based, right? That's what we're dealing with Tuvalu. So they're just thinking, okay, let's just go to like an eGov, digital portal, like the basics. But I think what blockchain-based services can provide is a way for them to leapfrog. So they can satisfy the digital part, but actually go to, BGov or B-commerce, right? So blockchain-based commerce and blockchain-based government. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the ways in which they can utilize what's happening here to leapfrog. But also look at, really blockchain, its biggest use case at the moment has been around, the financial revolution, right? The payment side. And the finance industry has been ripe for innovation for a good while. And so it's good to see what's happening now. But, we were mentioning volcanoes. I actually use volcanoes as an analogy to explain sort of what's happening, in the sense that, volcanoes provide a lot of power and energy, right? And you could say that they're very destructive, but they are also life-giving. Volcanoes are the reasons why we have land, And so at the beginning, it's very wasteful, right? It just it looks like it destroys everything. And I tie this to even like the mining industry. It's like what Daniel was just talking about. At the beginning, it sucks up a lot of energy. It looks like it's destroying everything else. But as you can see, it's now finding a way to make sure that the source of the energy that they're getting is coming from more renewable things. And because of the public nature, it means that there's more eyes from the public to keep them accountable. This is why I find it also fascinating. And, I'll tie in again with things like, mining and why it exists, like proof of work, and why I'm still a fan of it, actually, is that the proof of work mining system is equivalent to peacock tails, right? Peacock tails, we use this analogy. Peacock tails, when you look at them, it's like, what is its function, right? It's really to attract mates. And mining and proof of work is literally virtue signaling to everybody else that, hey, I'm working on this and I can't sort of skirt my responsibilities as a steward of the Bitcoin network. And so the proof of work ensures that they have visibility, that they can never be anonymous. That's why it exists. You take that out, it takes away the accountability around the game theory around Bitcoin.
Right.
So everything, again, right, it's not always a technical problem. These things are part of, the social aspects, the cultural aspects.
Yeah.
No,
go on.
Sorry,
go
no,
on.
you go.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, especially since you have this global experience, like mobile money, it kind of passed us in the Caribbean. So most people in the Caribbean don't know about it, but like M-Pesa in Africa, which is huge, where people didn't have bank accounts, but they had money basically in their phone. And this is before smartphones, really. So it has nothing to do with smartphone technology. But they had it sort of, if for Trinidad audiences, it would be more like when you have a B-Mobile card and you top it up, you could actually make payments at stores using your cell phone instead of having a bank account, so you don't have cash on you. And that was really big in Africa. I don't know if it's still very big, or I would imagine it's probably become institutionalized and is normal everywhere. But how does this compare to that? So how does Bitcoin compare to this, like mobile money, for example?
On the front end, for the user, it shouldn't actually be any different, if I'm honest, right? I keep going back to this plumbing system. And I think a lot of people get confused that they think that the front end experience is going to be a whole lot different. But actually, no, it should work like any other mobile application, et cetera. The only thing that's different is the data. And Daniel, you were talking about store of value. It's an interesting one because from what I've learned over the years, and I got involved with Bitcoin back in 2013, the store of value isn't necessarily the fiat value, right? The store of value is the data itself. And if you start measuring the value in terms of the data that's in the blockchain, right, or in the Bitcoin, that becomes even more interesting. And so this is what opens up the concept of micropayments for a user to actually make, a 10-cent transaction to somebody else, and it looked like it's virtually free. So the whole innovation was a person could send 10 cents to another without incurring those $40 fees that you'd expect when sending internationally, right? Because the fees are absorbed by the miners. So they might take like 0.00035 cents for that transaction. To the user, it's like, hey, no fees, but there is a fee. It's a micropayment. The current financial system cannot do that because of the way it's set up.
Right.
That's the real innovation. And the value is not the fiat value, it's the data that's in it. Right. The data and the financial value are connected in one, and that is what moves across.
Right. Because the reward for the miner who's confirming all these transactions is they get a little bit of Bitcoin. Right.
Correct.
Correct. That's the reward, because that's how Bitcoin is produced. It's not printed by a central bank when they're looking at inflation or the economy.
Yeah, they don't need to.
It's done per transaction, and then there'll be a point eventually when the limit is reached, they're not going to print anymore, and then I don't know what happens to the miners after that. But
I do,
Right.
And this is why it's so fascinating. So the game theoretics, right? Every 4 years, like it goes through a halving process, right? The value of Bitcoin that the miners can get back, the fiat value is less and less, right? So what that means is they have to start focusing on volume of transactions. Yeah. This is why our company, we look at, okay, which chain is actually producing on-chain transactions? As soon as it goes off-chain, the profitability in the long run will be not for the miners, and all the money that they're getting now, as soon as like everything's being mined, they will struggle. They will, because if there's not enough transactions to keep it going, everything can potentially collapse, and that's still a risk for Bitcoin, right? And that's why it's so important that actually we look at the innovations on the actual chain, like on chain, because if we start doing things that take it off chain, what most people don't realize is that takes away the usefulness of things like Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And we go back to the current system we already have, in which case is no innovation, and we're just like making ourselves feel good, with the hope and dream. So these are the things that, like, you know, it's been very humbling to learn this stuff over time. And it's still a contrarian view in the ecosystem. But I just, you know, put my head down and work in the background on this stuff, because when you dig deep underneath, you start, like, it just sort of logically reveals itself, like, oh my God, we actually have to get transactions working on this, on-chain transaction, for this to even be viable, because the true value is the data, right? We talk about data being the new oil. Yeah. That's what it's supposed to be.
People have to start buying things in Bitcoin, or else it's worthless, because it's supposed to be a currency.
Well, this is the thing. They might not even need to. Like, so most people think they need to be buying in Bitcoin. But remember the cash system, the plumbing?
Right.
So you could still have the US dollar on it, and they would be using Bitcoin without even knowing.
Right. So it could be the architecture behind the currency in a sense. Yeah. The accounting system underneath.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a very boring way, it is just an accounting system, a much more efficient accounting system.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Daniel, let me bring you back in terms of the possibilities and benefits you see in Trinidad or any other space you might be working in as well.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I would really love to see, youth education and empowerment in and around all of this space. One of the other things, so like my brother and I, we've really been thinking about how can we use blockchain for impact, how can we figure out a way to tokenize, important social and environmental actions that, what if someone went and planted and looked after 1,000 trees? How can we find some way to monetize that, for them? How can we reward them? How can we reward, waste collection and recycling and these types of things? It's very interesting when you can start to think about, there's this system that things can be built on that is fully transparent and is quite versatile. Another thing that has very much been exciting me, and George, this is kind of what I wanted to talk to you about as well, is so Kirk, there's something called NFTs, right? It's called a non-fungible token. And a good way to break it down in layman's terms for, I guess, the audience is like basketball cards or collectibles of stamps or whatnot. People hold value in owning these things. So what an NFT is basically like a digital version of anything. I can have the digital rights to something, whether it be a basketball card or something unique. So it's very interesting for the art and culture space, definitely, the collectible space, and there's a lot of money being pumped into the space right now for games and interactive things and whatnot like that as well. But I was really I'm very passionate about, in my opinion, it hurts me to know the types of destruction that is happening in our main rainforests, in the Congo, in the Amazon, in Indonesia, and these types of things. I'm also very passionate about ocean protection as well. And I'm looking at these platforms and I'm seeing people spending stupid amounts of money for, these pixelated, little collectibles with shades and hats and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's very interesting to observe because something is happening in that space. But what if we can connect and gamify? Because there are people that are dying every day in the Amazon from being brutally murdered from logging companies and these types of things. What if we can find a way to gamify them, tell their story in an animated, very cool type of a digital way, and sell it, and sell these on these open markets, and all of these proceeds and profits, and every time that thing is further traded or transacted, all of these benefits go towards the grassroots organizations as well as awareness campaigns and whatnot that are literally affecting these things.
Let me intervene here. I think, what, when you're saying that, what it kind of reminds me of? Remember the whole campaign about Kony in Africa, the Lord's Resistance Army, and how it trended with the hashtags and it sounds like, it could be something like all of a sudden everybody, they had no idea really about the politics behind it, but they knew that this was really bad, having children fighting in the Lord's Resistance Army in this insane civil war in Uganda, and they found Kony, and perhaps and just to sort of dig a little more into your ideas and experience and possibility. I understand you're associated with Richard Branson's Caribbean Center or something like that. Would that might be a good resource for developing your kind of ideas? I don't know.
Sort of. I mean, we got involved in one of their little accelerator programs and whatnot, and it's cool. You know, it's been beneficial. I think it was for like smaller organizations, but we still benefited from it. But back to what you said before, you know, and it's so powerful, and it's what George was also saying as well. Like, there's so much power in story and narratives. You know, like this world is literally built on it. You know, people like will die for these things. They don't even realize it. And I want to collaborate with people and utilize these new platforms and technologies to help let the world realize these are narratives that they are all involved in, whether they know it or not. And how can we get passionate about investing and gamifying these things to support and help change these narratives? So that's what I'm quite excited about. George, we can definitely talk after this. But you know, so Kirk, that's one thing that really excites me about blockchain. You know, the other thing that really excites me and opportunity wise, I think, just in terms of like small places and whatnot, is, as you said, just kind of exporting our culture through these systems, especially now with this type of world where, you know, travel is a bit more, you know, restricted and people are a bit more afraid and whatnot. You know, we need to think of innovative ways to export our, you know, our culture, our tourism, like our carnival, our experiences. So I think there's a lot that can be explored on those elements as well. Yeah.
Interesting. As we sort of move closer to the end of the program, let me ask you guys, in terms of, let's say, what sort of policies you think governments around the world should be considering? If, of course, each government in its own situation will have its own, you know, issues, but are there things you think that, you know, the countries that you've been working with, for example, George, your own home country, Fiji, and then elsewhere, Panama and whatnot, what are the types of things governments should be looking at in terms of policies to take advantage of this?
I think it's really interesting because, you know, over the last decade, I've seen how a lot of different countries have felt like they've needed to change their laws and policies and stuff to make way for crypto. But if there's anything I've learned, and again, in just using Bitcoin as a base, the more I've learned, the more I realize that it actually works perfectly within existing laws. So I personally don't think that many new laws or policies need to be created for this once you start to understand the technology. And I think that's what we're seeing, right? Government is still trying to understand the technology. So even the ones that may have already changed their policies, they're taking advice from other advisors. But over time, I think you'll see that they will start to understand it more and be like, oh, actually, I don't think we really need this because it still, you know, works fine within existing laws. I think the things that really need to be seen is all of these innovations on top of whatever chain it is, right? And how they're leveraging and utilizing the data on chain. Daniel, like, you know, I got goosebumps you talking about this stuff from the storytelling side, because that's what I started with back, you know, about a decade ago with these animating and preserving indigenous myths and legends. That's something that actually is of huge interest to me, because I know there's so much wisdom, right, in the old stories too. And to sort of come to this point now with the blockchain, and I see NFTs being a big one, right? Culturally, I think they're on the right path, because the people I'm seeing in the NFT space, they don't care about the blockchain. Those are the right conversations that need to be had, right? That what they're looking at is like, how can I use this to actually empower one another, right? The blockchain stuff is more for us geeks in the background. So from an education standpoint, what we, in my opinion, is that the education needs to come on like your basics around, you know, general building of wealth, right? Building businesses, assets. NFTs is where it starts to build assets out of these digital items, right? Cultural assets, right? Things that are stored on a blockchain, and if they can be converted into NFTs, what that means is in an animated story, you could have pieces that maybe was animated and put together by some indigenous woman in the Amazon, right? And you could have that like sellable in the animation, right? On Instagram right now, you can have these influencers have their Gucci bag, right? And be like, okay, you can go and sell that. Now imagine that for these animated stories or whatnot, these products, there's like maybe 100 only digital versions. People will go wild, you know, to be like, oh my God, this was created by like some Amazon woman. It's creating that connection, you know, from distances, but putting in digital form so that people still feel like they're getting something original, right? And truly original, not just a copy of. And then that is all recorded on chain. And then it provides new commerce markets that could hopefully go back to the people that it's meant to serve and benefit.
Wow,
it's access to markets that a lot of developing nations have not had, right? Because of lack of infrastructure, internet, all that sort of stuff. But that's changing now. Many developing nations do have internet. They do have access to mobile phones.
Exactly. And like Trinidad and Tobago, for example, has been on some blacklists, for instance, or international transactions are hard, and they might not accept the Trinidad credit card, or PayPal won't be, you won't be able to withdraw money to your bank account on PayPal, and and a lot of these e-commerce systems are closed to us in Trinidad. So something like Bitcoin provides an opportunity to escape those restrictions in the traditional system. But we have those other limitations in terms of the actual markets being underdeveloped at the moment.
Correct.
But Daniel, so in terms of your perspective, especially as an entrepreneur, what are the types of policies you think would be important for governments to consider and implement?
Well, I would just start with approaching it just with a bit more open-mindedness. Unfortunately, a lot of the guys that are running, the ministries of finance and these types of organizations, they got to where they are because they're good, but they tend to be stuck in their ways.
Mm-hmm.
This is a hard concept for them to wrap their heads around and whatnot. I think there's enormous value in in countries creating their own sort of digital currency. The larger ones are going to do it. China's definitely doing it. America's definitely doing it. But even from an investment perspective, I think what El Salvador has done has been really, really interesting by adopting this as legal tender. That's going to facilitate a lot of very interesting investments and talent, as well as an education and a conceptualization around these types of things. And just as I said, like more the investment standpoint, I think it makes sense for governments to start to put this on their balance sheets. Big corporations have started, and at some point, more and more governments are going to start to do it. And at the end of the day, I think just being open-minded to it and not closed-minded to it is going to make a big difference. I think being like a government saying that they're banning this, it's like they're starting a running race with a 100-pound weight attached to their foot. You're immediately setting yourself back. It might be hard to understand that now through lack of knowledge or arrogance even or whatnot, but the reality is this is happening. Like the adoption is happening. Metcalfe's law is happening. You can't stop it. It's already happening. So the quicker we realize that, the more we can educate ourselves and better ourselves. So from a policy standpoint, I just think that government should kind of really let their local banks be a bit more friendly and open towards it. It can be a way for a lot of foreign exchange to get back into economies, as well as a lot of job creation. We need to think about the world as a market right now and opportunities. I can sit down at my laptop here on a beach in Trinidad and Tobago and work for a company in Australia and get paid in US dollars for my inputs. Right, we need to facilitate and connect these type of dots. That's what I think.
All right, excellent. So, as a final parting words, what thoughts would you like to leave our audience with, George, and then Daniel?
Thoughts. Do your own research, but also be discerning. I think a lot of people say do your own research, but the problem we have today is that a lot of information that's online, you also then have to sort out what is true and what is not. So there's difficulties now with the amount of information that's out. I have a sort of quote or motto that has become more and more true. What's popular isn't always what's true, and you have to look at what matters to you. Does being popular matter, or does seeking truth? And truth is always a lot harder to seek. It's easy to get what you want, when you're just doing what's popular. So those will probably be my parting words.
Excellent advice. Daniel.
I love that advice. Awesome, George. Yeah, similarly, again, yeah, I would encourage people to dabble, to go and learn, to do your own research, to go and read. to be careful where you choose to get your information. But above all else, the best way to learn is by doing. Put a little bit of skin in the game and see how this thing works. Don't get emotional. Understand that this is early. This is a volatile asset. It's going to go up and down. It will. But guess what? When in doubt, zoom out. If you leave this in for the long term, I guarantee you will succeed. No ifs, ands, or buts, right? So just bear those things in mind. A lot of my friends that lost money in 2017, they freaked out and they panic sold for what little they got. If they were patient, 3 or 4 months ago, they would have been laughing because that asset appreciated by 5-6x.
Yeah, that's my experience I bought both Bitcoin and Ethereum, and for years I think, oh my God, this was terrible. And in the past year, I made it was like it all came back and more.
I'm passionate about financial education because I don't think we get enough of that in our schools and our systems and whatnot. So I encourage everyone out there to go out there and become financially literate. And the only way to do that is by doing, and then by doing, you will become more interested in learning and reading, and be patient. And when in doubt, zoom out and look into these types of new technologies, because, as I said, this is a new frontier and a whole new world is going to be created on it. The powers that be are pushing us towards a digital world. 5G is everywhere. Connectivity is everywhere. We have powerful computers in our pockets. People look at these things for hours and hours and hours and hours a day. This is the new platform, the new digital revolution. If you want to be a part of creating on this thing, there's a really amazing opportunity now. We are still very, very early. Yeah.
Right. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for this fascinating and interesting discussion. It's really been a pleasure having you both on the program.
Thanks
so much. Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, take care, guys. All the best. Be safe.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of A Story Club, Global Politics and Cultures, brought to you by Bulletproof Podcast Formula. We were talking with our guest, George Siosi Samuels from Fiji and Singapore, and now Panama, and Daniel Barkan from Trinidad and Tobago on Bitcoin, blockchain, and small island developing states, opportunities, challenges, and questions. I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for watching and listening. Please join us again next week. And in the meanwhile, like, share, follow, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you're watching on YouTube, please also click on the bell icon so you get notifications of when our programs are uploaded. Thanks again, and see you next week.